Hybrid warfare with disinformation, cyber espionage, and spyware infestations, BugDrop in Ukraine, and some cut-and-paste oddness slips from Fancy Bear's paws. A new X-Agent variant is out, this one infects Macs. Ransomware thumbs its nose at security products. A look at RSA trends as the conference closes, a conversation with San Diego's CISO, and a t-shirt that we really want to get. Time for a message from our sponsor, E8 Security. They're putting your data together with E8's analytics for security that can handle the unknown unknowns. Consider what might warn you off to malware on your system. Listening or running programs on a rare or never-seen-before open port is one of them. It's easy to say that, but could you say what counted as rare or never seen before? Or would that information jump out at you as you reviewed your logs? If you had time to review your logs, and by the time the logs reached you, chances are that news would be old. But E8's analytical tools recognize and flag that threat at once, enabling you to detect, hunt, and respond. You got to check out their white paper at e8security.com/DHR and get started. E8 Security, your trusted partner. That's e8security.com/DHR. And we thank E8 for sponsoring our show. Major funding for the CyberWire podcast is provided by Cylance. I'm Dave Bittner, back in Baltimore with your CyberWire summary for Friday, February 17th, 2017. Hybrid conflict with all of its ambiguities and attendant fog continues in Eastern Europe. Deutsche Welle reports a Russian disinformation campaign in the Baltic, with phony news stories planted alleging that German soldiers on NATO deployments have been responsible for a wave of assaults in Lithuania. Both German and Lithuanian officials say none of the claimed assaults happened, but the disinformation, while surely crude, will no doubt leave its residue behind in segments of public opinion, which of course is the point. Researchers at security firm CyberX have taken a look at a cyber campaign in Ukraine, possibly criminal, possibly state-directed, possibly a mix of the two, that's been responsible for a widespread spyware infestation in Ukrainian businesses. More than 70 enterprises are said to have been affected by what CyberX is calling BugDrop. SINAC researchers have been taking a look at tools that appear to have recently slipped from Fancy Bear's paws, and they conclude that those tools look a great deal like lawful intercept products from Hacking Team. Fancy Bear is generally believed to be Russia's military intelligence establishment, GRU, if you're keeping score at home. SINAC sees a weirdness in the code that suggests a copy-and-paste job. Bitdefender believes it's found evidence that there's now a variant of Fancy Bear's X-Agent malware that targets macOS. X-Agent is modular malware used in targeted cyber espionage. It's modular in that once installed, it reports back to its commanders and controllers for instructions. Those instructions could involve directions to search for various files. They could direct X-Agent to download and execute other malware packages. Senior U.S. officials, including the Vice President and the Secretaries of State and Defense, are making the diplomatic rounds in Europe, and cyber matters have inevitably arisen during their discussions. Secretary of Defense Mattis said, "There's very little doubt that Russia has interfered with elections." One might add, in fairness, that historically it's not been just Russia. Panda Labs reports a new criminal hack, RDP Patcher, which simply sells third-party access to a victim computer. What they do with that access is presumably up to them. G-Data, the German security firm, has identified a new strain of ransomware they're calling Hermes, after the god of medicine, messaging, and theft. And there's good news already. The Austrian security company Emsisoft has already decrypted it. So bravo G-Data and bravissimo Emsisoft. RSA 2017 wrapped up today in that city by the other bay, and our stringers and editors have some thoughts on the conference's recurring themes. First, AI, artificial intelligence, has been to this year's conference as big data and threat intelligence have been to the last couple of RSA seances. These have all been dismissed as buzzwords, which isn't exactly fair since there's a serious reality behind all of them, but caveat auditor, an awful lot of people will say AI in your presence. It's worth listening to them with respectful, open-minded skepticism. We're working on a special edition of our podcast covering artificial intelligence, so stay tuned for that in the coming days. Second, in the West at least, the crypto wars appear to have been won by the pro-encryption side, and this is seen by many as essentially a technology-driven trend even the most obsessively repressive governments will find difficult to resist. Third, industry is worried about the growing tempo of international conflict in cyberspace and is urging governments to take seriously their operations in this new domain. If there are restraints on kinetic warfare, albeit imperfect restraints, that are designed to contain it, limit its effects on non-combatants, and seek to induce combatants to fight in ways that don't make the restoration of peace impossible, shouldn't there be similar restraints placed on cyber conflict? The time for this would appear to have come. Cyber warfare is no longer in its infancy, but it hasn't yet left its adolescence, and this may be the last best opportunity to influence its development. Fourth and last, there's a general sense in the air that consolidation in some form lies in the security industry's near future. Our own experience of the conference differs a bit from that reported by Software Development Times, which notes that the conference has gone smaller and focused on enduring issues. Both may well be true objectively, but subjectively we felt a nervous urgency and heard much more barking in the carny roustabout sense of the word than we remember from past conferences. We'll give the last word on the atmosphere to the words on a t-shirt worn by an executive we interviewed. The shirt said, "Does not have purchase authority." Many of those walking through the exhibits this year might have wished they'd worn similarly legible apparel. And finally, we'll leave RSA and return to ransomware. Late last month, Trend Micro began tracking a new variant of the familiar Cerber ransomware. It's an odd duck. It encrypts the files on a victim's machine, except for one interesting class of software, security products. These it has whitelisted, and it leaves them studiously alone for reasons that are quite unclear. Bleeping Computer has some speculation about the criminal coder's motives that seem as good as any. They're going out of their way to thumb their nose at the security vendors. Time for a message from our sustaining sponsor, Cylance. Are you looking for something beyond legacy security approaches? If you are, and of course who isn't, you're probably interested in something that protects you at machine speed and that recognizes malware for what it is, no matter how the bad guys have tweaked the binaries or cloaked their malice in the appearance of innocence. Cylance knows malware by its DNA. Their solution scales easily, and it protects your network with minimal updates, less burden on your system resources, and limited impact on your network and your users. Find out how Cylance is revolutionizing security with artificial intelligence and machine learning. It may be artificial intelligence, but it's real protection. Visit Cylance.com to learn more about the next generation of anti-malware. Cylance, artificial intelligence, real threat protection. That's Cylance.com. And we thank Cylance for sponsoring our show. And I'm pleased to be joined once again by Rick Howard. He's the CISO at Palo Alto Networks, and he also heads up their Unit 42 Threat Intel team. Rick, we've spoken before about the Cyber Canon, your list of must-read books when it comes to cybersecurity, but you've got some updates for us. Bring us up to date.
So think of the Canon as a project as a rock and roll hall of fame for cybersecurity books. We have 10 outside practitioners, CISOs, journalists, lawyers, those kinds of folks, who review the most important cybersecurity books on the shelves and make the case why we all should have read them by now. I say all of this because I want to talk about one of the books that made it onto the candidate list this year. It's called The Phoenix Project. It was written by Gene Kim, Kevin Baer, and George Stafford. It is a novel now about the emerging idea called DevOps. Have you heard of DevOps before?
I have.
All right, so DevOps is perhaps, I think, the most important innovation that has happened to the IT sector since the invention of the personal computer back in the early 1980s. But it is a relatively new and complex idea. And it emerged out of three converging thoughts sometime in the late 2009. All right, so first one was the agile development method that all your developers are looking at. A talk given by Alan Allspaw and Paul Hammond at the 2009 Velocity Conference, and the talk was called 10 plus deploys per day. And this third thing, a book called Eric Rice called the Lean Startup. So DevOps is this idea that there needs to be a much tighter integration between software developers and information technology operations. So let me give you an example. Most organizations today pass IT and security work through internal black boxes. Product managers, marketing people, developers, quality assurance folks, system engineers, all the way down the line. DevOps is the recognition that instead of managing each of these black boxes separately, the organization needs to think of IT and security work as one big system of systems and manage it that way, sort of a production line of IT work, with the goal of reducing or eliminating completely any kind of technical debt that grows through that process. So that is a very subtle but disruptive idea. So the authors behind the Phoenix Project, instead of writing a technical IT book on the benefits of this emerging idea, they chose to write a novel to make the material more acceptable to the general populace. But it centers on an online retail store that used to be the number one player, but they've fallen behind because they can't keep up with its competitors. The IT department has projected to fix all that. They have a project for it called Project Phoenix, but it's 2 years behind schedule. So at the beginning of the book, the CEO has fired the CIO and promoted a mid-tier IT manager as the acting CIO and has given him 6 months to fix the problem. So with the aid of an Obi-Wan Kenobi-like figure from the board of directors, this interim CIO learns the way of DevOps and saves the company. So what I'm telling you is if you're just hearing about DevOps now or want to learn more about it, this book, The Phoenix Project, is a great way to get introduced to the material.
So it's kind of that notion of a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down, right?
It is. It really is. And it makes it so much easier to learn, too, let me tell you.
All right. Well, I'll have to check that one out. The Phoenix Project, part of the Cyber Canon. Rick Howard, as always, thanks for joining us. Time to thank our sponsor, Palo Alto Networks. You can visit them at go.paloaltonetworks.com/secureclouds. When using public clouds like Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure, security becomes a shared responsibility. Are you doing your share? And how are you making sure you're protecting your apps and data in any environment? Palo Alto Networks provides next-gen cloud security that gives you complete visibility so you can control your apps and reduce your threat surface area from the network to the cloud. Make sure your apps and data are secure and protected wherever they may be. Palo Alto Networks has the broadest, most comprehensive cybersecurity for all clouds and software-as-a-service environments, because secure clouds are happy clouds. Find out how to secure yours. Get started at go.paloaltonetworks.com/secureclouds. And we thank Palo Alto Networks for sponsoring our show. My guest today is Gary Hayslip. He's the Chief Information Security Officer for the City of San Diego, California. He's also co-author of the book, The CISO Desk Reference Guide, a practical guide for CISOs.
Most people, when they hear that you're the CISO for a city, they just assume cities are hey, you got a network you got to manage, and I'm like, no, I don't have one network, I have 24 networks. I've got 11,000 employees. I've got somewhere in the neighborhood of about close to 45 to 50,000 endpoints. They kind of give you an idea. My network is not static. My network's on the move. I mean, my network is trash trucks with GPS sensors and police cars, connected to our wireless systems, and HVAC systems, and golf courses and libraries and desktops, and public works employees out in the field with tablets. It's a very dynamic, very malleable collection of enterprise networks.
And so how do you approach a system that large with that much variety?
Well, I mean, one of the things I've kind of realized right away is the fact that we'll never really totally know, everything that is on my network. And what I mean by that is that, I used to believe, years ago when I was in DOD, and maybe it was because I was in a more controlled environment, that, you'd be able to control your perimeters, and you would know everything that was connected to your networks, and, everyone's going to follow the rules. And, what you kind of learn once I got out of that environment and actually got out here in the real world is that, networks tend to be chaotic. Controlling your perimeter is only as good as your users actually following the rules, which a lot of them will follow it until it interferes with them being able to do business, to be able to do work, and then they're going to figure out workarounds. You've got to deal with the fact that your perimeters aren't solid, that your perimeters are on people's cell phones and tablets and laptops. And I've come to the conclusion that, for me, cybersecurity is a life cycle. It's a continuous process of monitoring and scanning and remediation and breaches. You're going to take them. Having a completely secured network that never gets breached is fantasy. It's not going to happen. When you use networks, when you use technology, it gets dirty, because the internet is not a clean place. And the way I work with it is that I use a framework like NIST to be able to take what I have, break it down, and help me understand where my risk is, and help me prioritize, what needs to be fixed now and what we can fix when I have the personnel or the resources or the funding. And I spend a lot of my time in my departments, talking with, it's one of the biggest things I have learned after I left DoD is that I cannot dictate and tell people, cybersecurity, you have to do this, you're going to put us at risk. I got to make people want to work with me. I've got to advocate and be a cheerleader and get people to want to go ahead and follow cybersecurity and get them to understand that it's, actually in the best interest of the business, and that if we're secure, we can even be more innovative and be more successful and more effective. But to get them to that stage, I've got to make the case. I've got to make the case as to why, from a business perspective, why we should be doing cybersecurity.
Well, what are some of the unique challenges you face, being in a government situation versus someone in the private sector?
Some of the things that, we deal with here, some of the decisions we're making on technology and stuff have some life and death consequences when you think about, water, when you think about the 911 system. I think, some of the things that make it really hard for us is the fact that we're a 24/7 business. The city of San Diego is a $4 billion business. We're running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So how do you do change? If I've got to rip out a network and put in, some new fiber or put in a new routers and switches and stuff, backbone-wise to handle, HD video, well, I can't shut the network down. And so a lot of times this will make our projects actually go twice as long because, the complexity involved. Sometimes we have to do things in parallel. And then once we have it built up, then plan to switch over. With the least amount of interruption to services as possible. Because a lot of the services that we provide are to my neighbors, and they have no problem coming over and yelling at me about stuff. So, whether it's buying permits because you want to open up a new business, or whether it's, you want to pay your water bill or pay a parking ticket. That's some of the things that I've noticed right away is that in this position is that some of the decisions we make have an immediate impact. And not only that, they have an immediate impact on a wide range of people, on organizations. And then, like I said, then we have a lot of our challenges in the fact that you're dealing with, technology that is 20-some years old to new technologies like cloud and virtualized networks. You're connecting these disparate technologies together. And so there is unknown risk. You're constantly trying to, update a lot of your older technologies and replace them. But at the same time, you have to maintain them until you can get them replaced.
Yeah.
And so it's a very interesting environment from a risk perspective.
That's Gary Hayslip, the Chief Information Security Officer for the City of San Diego, California. He's co-author of the book, The CISO Desk Reference Guide, a practical guide for CISOs. And that's the CyberWire. Remember, Monday is President's Day here in these United States of America, and we, like all patriots, are sort of taking the day off. But not to worry, we'll be back as usual on Tuesday. In the meantime, check out some of our special editions. They're evergreen. Thanks to all of our sponsors who make the CyberWire possible, especially our sustaining sponsor, Cylance. To find out how they can protect you from cyber attacks, visit Cylance.com. The CyberWire podcast is produced by Pratt Street Media. Our editor is John Petrick. Our social media editor is Jennifer Iben. Our technical editor is Chris Russell. Our executive editor is Peter Kilby. And I'm Dave Bittner. Have a great weekend, everybody. And thanks for listening.